This is Ed in San Diego. As you could see, it's a beautiful day in San Diego. And that is taken, I shot that picture on Harbor Island 2 days ago. And it's a nice sunny day, beautiful. Temperature about 65 Fahrenheit. Um, so spring is coming this weekend. Wow. With
Right.
us today in New York City, where spring is dreamt about. Maybe maybe not experienced today. James Moss, Curzon Central. And this is Curzon Comments, a dialogue between he and I about property and real estate in Manhattan area and London, a little bit about London and what it's all about, and discussing the world of business today. James, welcome.
Hey, thank you very much, Ed. Great to be here again. Love your picture, by the way.
Thank you.
Yes, spring is round the corner. I'll tell you something slightly funny, slightly amusing. All my calendar clocks with the UK and Europe are out by an hour at the moment.
Oh, yes,
Uh,
because they don't change time until what, the end of the month?
the end of the month, yeah, exactly. So we're sort of 4 hours with UK, 5 hours with the Europeans, EU. So, but it's such a fact to sort of adjust all the calendars.
Right, crazy. That's crazy. And who
So
knows? So
anyway,
now when I just say, okay, we're going to broadcast from 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. California time, and then people can adjust on their own. I don't have to screw around trying to figure out what time zone it's going to be.
yeah, that's exactly the right way to do it.
Yeah, live and
Anyway,
learn.
live and learn, live and learn, live and learn.
Yeah. So what's the weather like today in Manhattan?
We actually have a bit of sun, which is very pleasant, having had a fair bit of rain yesterday. But Manhattan is really cold today, and we're in spring, and so you have these over here in it's on the East Coast, which you know really well. I know me from Boston. I know you know New York incredibly well. You get this huge variation. So sort of, one moment you're sort of, in your sort of your shorts and your flip-flops, or what my kids call slides. I think that's the language they use these days. Um,
Slides, yeah.
and and the next moment you're digging out your woolly coat, and you sort of and your furry hat. So anyway, but it's heading in the right direction.
Yeah,
That's the main thing.
absolutely. The leaves will start to come out here in San Diego. It's still a bit chilly because the ocean temperature decides everything over here. The Pacific Ocean you think would be warm, but it's actually quite cold. Um, it doesn't warm up till like late July, August, and then it'll be
Uh,
75 degrees. And
oh,
and with that water temperature, it gets real humid here. Typically, because this San Diego is semi-desert, not real desert, but semi-desert, it's quite dry and arid, and that's why it doesn't rain a lot. But we just had a bout of rain for a solid week, drenched,
oh golly.
but not today, as you can see. So spring is coming, and when the ocean temperature warms up, because the sun elevating in the sky, spring means it moves north rather than south, and so it's higher up. And there's more daylight, more strength, blah, blah, blah. And you could see it, the buds on the trees are blooming right now, just in the
Ah,
last 2 days because of the rain, I think. Because it really didn't rain here in San Diego for months,
yes,
absolute
yeah, sure, sure.
months, not since May.
God,
And so here it is in March, right? Mid-March. So that's a long time.
it's a long wait, isn't it?
Yeah, right, right. So in Northern California, San Francisco area and north, and of course in the mountains just to the east, it's a different weather pattern totally,
uh,
and they get a lot of rain, and that's where it belongs up there, because then it goes into the water table, and the mountains create snow, and it all flows down into the Central Valley, which is where all the agriculture is, and a giant farm area, and into the Colorado River. Just drops down from the snowpack into the Colorado River, and that becomes irrigation down through the desert.
okay,
Yeah, yeah,
excellent.
they figured it out 100 years ago. So
Well,
that's
that's
why that's
yeah,
why even though we don't get a lot of rain here, we still survive because
yeah.
the water comes from other sources.
Well, that sort of sounds like the way it should work, really. Except you'd have a bit more rain in between.
Yeah, it would be
Um,
nice to have a one day of rain a week.
yeah, just a bit of moisture in the air.
Right, right. Clean the well, enough of the weather forecast here.
Yeah, yeah,
So, at another time, let's talk about you and I offline here. Let's talk about conferences again, meetings and events, live events
yeah. Okay.
with a hybrid component as well.
Yeah.
But first, let's talk about London and Canada with a new leader. Um, a former banker is part of the Liberal Party, which is a bit of a surprise to me anyway. But there was the opportunity. So whoops, he's now a liberal and running the party, and it's actually a really smart, timely move in my view.
Yes, well, I agree totally. I am a very big Mark Carney fan. Um, he, he did a very, very good job. Going back some, I don't know, 10 years or more now, as the governor of the Bank of England,
Mhm.
when he was there, first foreigner, as the governor of the Bank of England, and he did an excellent job. We actually did a piece, strangely enough, a little sort of anecdote here. We were contacted by the Financial Times at the time of his appointment. And the reason we were contacted is everyone was getting very excited that he was getting a very big relocation allowance. So he could go and find a half decent place to live and so on top of, a reasonable salary. And everyone was getting a little bit sort of heated under the collar. So we got a call from the FT saying, look, you're relocation experts, you know what's going on here. What does this sound like to you? And we said, look, we said, we think this is a great deal for the UK. This guy's housing allowance is half, or even less than half of the equivalent people who relocated his level. So you're looking at like partners of Goldman Sachs. He was a Goldman Sachs guy. Their allowance is a double what he had. Um, Also, the former governor of the Bank of England lived in a very lovely location, London, Notting Hill, which you'll remember well, which is a very trendy, expensive part. And Mark Carney was living in somewhere you've probably never heard of it. It's not that well known. Somewhere like Crouch End, which is sort of you think Crouch End. Well, what is he talking about? But it's a sort of smaller place in northern London, and it's really nice, but it's much more sort of low key and a lot less expensive. So we did a benchmark exercising thing, and we reached out to where he was living in Canada, and he wasn't living in Toronto, and he wasn't living in Montreal. He was living in somewhere in one of the sort of outer provinces, if you like. And we figured that the price differentiation in rent between where he was living and where he was going in London was 240%. Okay. So huge. So this guy was, sort of paying the equivalent of peanuts in Canada. Um, versus what he'd be paying in London. And you know what? It sort of made the headlines of the FT, and it was terrific. And everyone was happy. And the headline in the FT, and they ran on the inside page, but they did it in like a high profile thing, was value for money. And and my last sentence to the FT guys was, we think is giving the taxpayer great value for money.
So did
Um,
did you save that? Did you take a picture of that image?
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. I
good.
don't have it here, but yeah.
Well, I would like to encourage you to find that again
Okay.
and maybe spiff it up if you can, and then make a slide out of it to show on our next Curzon comments.
Yeah, yeah. Be delighted to. Be delighted to.
Yeah,
Um,
that would be a cool thing
yeah.
because then the world will see it.
Then the world was it. Absolutely. And I got to say, it was a bit of fun at the time. We got calls from all sorts of people saying this is great. And anyway, he did a great job. But going back to Canada, he did a great job as the governor of the Bank of Canada. And I think he is just like the perfect guy in the right place at the right time, regardless of parties and so forth, to pick up the mantle in Canada. And I'm delighted to see it. I think it's great, and I think he'll do a really good job. It's going to be really challenging, but he's got the gravitas, he's got the knowledge. I mean, it's not many, leaders who've run two, national banks of two major economies in the world. He knows what he's talking about. So I think it's great news for Canada, and it'll be really fascinating to see where it all goes.
And I see connection much closer, much more visibly closer between Canada and UK and between Toronto and London because of the connections, personal connections, and timing, whereby Europe, the EU, is consolidating economically much more than before um, as a response to President Trump's actions, as they current are. Not sure what'll happen next week, but so so far,
Yeah,
I think it's a
anyone's
good
guess.
reaction.
Anyone's guess. Anyone's guess.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there's always been a great warmth and relationship between Canada and the UK. I mean, they're technically, they're part of the Commonwealth, but in a really nice way, if you know what I mean. So, I saw yesterday the clip of King Charles meeting Mark Carney, and it was what struck me. I'll tell you what struck me. Ed. What struck me was that there we have these two perfect gentlemen meeting and greeting one another. The chemistry was great. They were civilized. The etiquette was informal but formal, if you see what I'm getting at. There was a great comfort there. Um, it's a wonderful relationship, but without being a sort of dominant colony sort of historic sort of thing. Um, so I thought that was great. I think it's great for both countries. EU, yeah, they are really going through a lot of changes there. So the Canadian UK relationship is very close and very. And just to throw in for the sake of nothing, my mother was actually Canadian, so I
isn't
might,
that
I,
interesting?
I might just have a slight partisan view there.
So let me ask you a quick question before we get into property talk in Manhattan area. Uh, is King Charles the King of Canada as well?
Well, yeah, the answer is a really good question. I'm not entirely sure how to answer it. Canada is in the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth countries are technically UK. Therefore, King Charles III would be King Charles III of Canada. But of course, Canada, like the US, does not have a monarchy. So it's a sort of slightly de facto extended thing. I mean, Canadians, no, honestly, do not want to hear. I don't think that King Charles of the Third is King Charles the Third of Canada. I mean, but there is that flow, sort of, I guess, constitutionally. In some Commonwealth countries, you also see it through the courts. But I don't know if that's the case of Canada. I suspect it's not. I suspect it's very diluted. Let's put it like that. And from my understanding, I think it works very well. I mean, I'm sure, there are Republicans everywhere, including in the UK, by the way, who would like to have nothing to do with the monarchy. Um, but it does, the flow of the monarchy, if you like that sort of thing, it sort of translates quite well. And, you have, for instance, here we go, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the Mounties, Royal. So, so there's these really nice connections, I think.
Let's move quickly. We have a few minutes remaining here in this brief Curzon comments. But if we could look at those slides that you have, particularly um, with the tariff talk, and just as a quick summary, and then let's move into the other slides that you have.
Sure. Let's have a quick look at what's going on. Uh,
I remember that there was, uh, and here they are. Okay.
yeah,
Okay, so I think this is just beautiful, and I'm really thankful for you to use these to display these on Curzon Comments on Global Business News TV. So, okay, so Canada tariffs 25% on some things, 10% energy. Mexico 25%, but off and on, and China 20%. And so
yeah. I mean,
President Trump was campaigning on helping working class people and fixing the economy. So if these stay going forward into the spring and summer, the working class people in America are the ones who are going to pay all for all this, not anybody else. I mean,
it's
they'll be impacted, but it doesn't impact them.
it's absolutely correct. I mean, these Trump tariffs, and maybe I just like to mention this was dated the 4th of March, and go back to your comment earlier. They keep changing every day.
Yeah.
So, but I think the basic numbers are pretty well held. The American consumer is the person who's going to get hurt most by all of this. And because the Trump administration has slapped these tariffs on, we'll have a look at the next slide in a moment, which will sort of drill down on some of the products. Um, these countries have already countered with putting tariffs on American imports and so on. It's going to open up an economic bloodbath. It will drive up inflation. It's going to drive up, obviously, the cost of the consumer as part of that. Um, it's going to not help interest rates come down, let's put it like that. And interest rates may even have to start going up again if inflation starts to take off. At the moment, the American economy is actually pretty robust. It was, putting politics aside, when Trump took over, the American economy was actually very balanced. I mean, there were some sectors which were more volatile than others. That picture's now really changed very, very quickly.
Let's go to the next slide.
Okay, let's see. Here we go. You find the button. There we go.
Okay,
So
so these like trucks. So in Canada
yes,
uh, and Mexico,
Yeah,
huge integration with the auto industry.
massive, absolutely
Right.
massive. Um, I mean, if you're thinking about going to buy a truck at the moment, and in America, you're an American, you're going to go and do that, you probably don't want to be doing it right now. A huge proportion, 78% here of American trucks are manufactured through Mexico. The other thing is to say that the parts of the trucks and other automotive and you know uh, parts often go across multiple borders before they reach the assembly point.
A
So
lot of
they are,
transportation for sure.
yeah, so they're picking up, they're picking up tariffs every time they go across.
Yeah.
So you've got this huge escalation going on. I mean, it really is huge. Um, An interesting one here is another interesting one is crude petroleum, and 58% of that is imported from Canada. Huge amount, huge amount. You don't think about that really when you're here in the States. But that is just massive, simply massive. The other thing that comes from Canada, which isn't here, but it's just worth mentioning, is wood and lumber for building materials. Canada is a major source of construction lumber and timber for American homes.
Yes,
Um,
and so that is definitely going to impact the housing construction business. There's no
exactly.
question of already it has. And aluminum, the U.S., I happen to know, imports tremendous amounts of aluminum made in Canada. Why?
Yeah,
Because of
right.
building materials, because of means office buildings and housing, but much more so the manufacturing of cars.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
that's aluminum.
yeah, yeah. You're totally right. You're totally right. I mean, this potentially is going to be a disaster, and the longer it goes on for, the worse it's going to get. And particularly if we get into this tick to tack mentality or tick for tack mentality, where I put it up, then you've put yours up. Now I'm going to put mine up again. Well, we're going to have to put ours up again, and then you sort of get into this whole vicious spiral,
And that's
upward
what's
spiral.
driving the stock market's fear
It's it's
of recession and getting caught. And
it's
yet it's
uh,
not, it's just so unknown. The uncertainty is the terrible thing here.
terrible, absolutely terrible. And we'll have a look at the stock market in a second here. But it's absolutely rubbishing the stock markets at the moment. I mean, no one knows what's going on. No one knows where to invest. It's interesting that Warren Buffett is sitting on more cash than he's ever sat on in his life before, and deliberately so. I mean, hundreds of billions of dollars, which he doesn't feel confident to invest, to put into the markets or put anywhere at the moment.
So,
Um,
audience, just to make sure you understand this, because many of you will see this long after today's production date. Today is 18 March, and first day of spring is coming up the end of this week. We're all looking forward to spring forward and warmer temperatures and less turmoil in the markets. I pray. James, let's go to the next slide.
okay,
Yeah,
Europe. There we
yeah,
go. Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So we hear all this chat about China, Mexico, um, Canada. Um, but the European situation is also really quite fascinating. As you can see here, Europe exports almost 20% of their goods to the United States, um, and imports uh, to the US from the EU 15%. The numbers are reasonably chunky, as you can see. Uh, if you look at services, services are always underrated by economists in data tables, but they are often the largest or one of the major exports imports between countries. So the looking at imports from the US and services to the EU, that's 151 billion euros, and the reciprocal is 165 billion euros just in services from the EU to the US. If you look at the other numbers below, so you look at the other numbers, and they're all in the sort of tens of billions. So it gives you the whole services market. It really stresses the importance of that. Um, Tariffs tend to hit physical things. Okay, it doesn't. Tariffs don't really hit services. At least they haven't so far. Um, but you look at the relationship with between the US and the EU economically, and these countries have a huge impact um, on each other. And the EU at the moment, economically, is not particularly unified, which again is another point which doesn't really show up here as much. But for instance, countries, you look at what's happening in Germany at the moment, the largest economy in the EU, and they are completely restructuring, trying to restructure their reliance on America and other third parties. They're looking at the whole infrastructure regearing and so on at the moment. They are driving up defense spending because the Europeans really want to rely less, if they possibly can, on the assurance that the United States is going to be there should there be another major conflict in Europe. Um, so there are a lot of these other um, subtleties and undercurrents going on between the EU and the United States. UK
Fascinating. Fascinating.
isn't isn't EU, isn't in the EU at the moment following the Brexit, but there is this unified effort between the UK and Europe and so on, all really living in fear of the Russian bear, of Putin, and what he's going to do next. And so we have this very, very interesting and extended geopolitical engagement going on. And we're just looking at, we're just looking at certain specific markets at the moment. I mean, so yeah, it's a very full and very complicated picture.
Let's go to the next slide. We could
Okay.
zero in.
Okay. So we're back to the stock market. We're back to global trading, and what's been happening in the stock markets. We're looking here just at the US stock market, the world's largest and most important market. And what's interesting here is you can see on the left-hand side when Trump got elected, and the economy was running pretty well up to that point. And then he got the Trump bump, which was great. So the stock, I remember that day, and everything went up and it shot up, and everyone took some profits, which was great. And all the Wall Street traders were going, "This is going to be fantastic. We're all going to make money, and it's going to have deregulation, and it's going to be amazing, and we're going to be rolling in it." Okay. Um, well, that was pretty good for a few days. And then the euphoria started to wear off a little bit. There was talk of tariffs and stuff, but no actions had yet been taken, although they were threatened to be taken immediately. And then bang, they kicked in. And you can see the collapse of the of the New York stock of the American stock market once the tariffs really got going. Even the talk of the tariffs was bringing the market down. You had other factors going on. Obviously, the impact of the tariffs with China, the war with China, hit the tech, the Magnificent Seven, incredibly hard. And the tech sector in the market accounts for about 30% of the market. If you look at the S&P 500, which is a weighted index, the impact of the huge technology companies is absolutely massive. Um, so Apple and Google and Alphabet and all these guys, Nvidia and the export of their chips, their new Blackwell chips that are coming online, and all of this is impacting. And bang, we've got the equivalent of a locomotive crash going on here. The markets have absolutely plummeted, and how long is this going to go on for? What's it going to take for them to recover? I mean, some shares. I mean, Nvidia is interesting that it lost almost half its value at one point. Um, so the whole technology thing is really where the big China thing comes into play. I think is really more that side of life. Um, so yeah, so there you are. This is this is today's reality, if you like. This was on March the 12th, so this was done
So
last.
it's now March 18, and the Dow opened down like 400 points and
Uh,
has now come back up 50%.
yeah,
So now it's still down over yesterday, down 230 odd points. As you can tell, it's moving fast. And there's just tons of trading going on. So there are big players um, buying and selling pretty quick.
yeah, yeah. And the market's now. I actually, being a bit of a sort of economics buff and have run a little bit of a portfolio myself. I keep an eye on the market. So the Nasdaq is down 1.58% today. Yeah, the Dow is down almost a point. S&P is down a point. Interestingly though, the European markets have actually done really quite well this year so far.
That's
Um,
fascinating. Let's
yeah,
go to the real estate side of things. I know you have some interesting items coming up on the next slide. If we could zero in on that for a few minutes. Now, this
absolutely.
is New York City. New York
It's-
is a big place. That's not just a small town. Okay, so and this in the middle column, this is median asking price of property uh, since November 24,
that's right.
which
That's
is about
it.
6 months ago, right?
Yeah, it's yeah, that's right. It's a year on
Almost
year
6 months.
change. It's almost 6 months ago.
Okay,
Um,
so these are all the different New York City neighborhoods. Um, and let's talk about well, everybody talks about Midtown. That's where all the big buildings are, right? And
that's
so
right.
Hudson Yards and whatever.
Yes.
So these are asking prices of what condos.
Yeah, predominantly, yeah. They will be all condos and co-ops. That's right. That's exactly apartments, in other words. Yeah,
Right. So November, this past November, uh, so the price, let's say Midtown Manhattan, it says 1.98 million, down 27.7.
that's
So
right.
that means in November of 2024, it was 27% higher.
Uh, Lower. Well, yes,
Uh,
that's right. I mean, we're lower today than we were then. Yes, that's
okay,
exactly right. That's what it's saying.
okay. That's just
So,
so you see what it is. Now, the reason why is because demand is off. The people are being, I don't know if they're being afraid. They're just saying, well, now's not the right time. It's winter, and I'm not interested. So the prices are going down, asking prices.
Well, that's part of it, but that's not the whole story. I mean, mortgage rates have stayed stubbornly high. Um, there is uh, this real lack of confidence going on in the U.S. economy. Again, it's a reflection of the tariffs and stuff like that. November, of course, is when the election took place. So in November, we knew that Trump was going to become the next president. Okay. Um, and I think in terms of people owning houses, that meant that interest rates probably weren't going to come down as fast. Mortgage rates were staying high. There's probably a lot of overpricing going on originally. You often get a gap. It's a supply and demand equation, which is sort of what you referred to earlier on, and that's what it is. And you often get this gap between a seller's expectations and wishes versus what a buyer is actually going to pay and what reality is. And what we have here is we have the falling, the dropping of those prices as basically the reality for the seller starts to starts to happen, and they realize that people just are not going to be paying these sorts of prices for their types of property. Midtown is a really good one because it's it covers a lot of Manhattan. The actual sort of I don't know if I was picking a couple of these out. Greenwich Village is super popular, super chic, super trendy, super everything. It's lovely down there. Colossal drop there, 31%. Um, the other place, where else I go? We have Chelsea, which is sort of the equivalent of I don't know what could I say, Notting Hill in London, Holland Park, best parts of Kensington and Chelsea.
Now that's on the west side below Hudson Yards.
Yeah, that's right. It's down that quadrant there. 20% down on asking prices. Um, Tribeca, okay, it's held up a bit better. It's only down 12%. But in some of these areas, I mean, some of these areas are in Brooklyn, for example, Bay Ridge is in Brooklyn and Queens. You are seeing really colossal price adjustments and prices really, really dropping. Some of it is seasonal. As I say, now spring is here. It's considered one of the best buying seasons of the year, the prime buying season of the year, both in New York and London. But yeah, but they're are they? I wouldn't say they're tanking, but they're certainly aggressively heading south. That's for sure.
Well, you've been privileged, I think, to hear from James Moss today about all this technical information, financial information that impacts it, everyone. The nerve center, London, New York. Out here in California, it's not the nerve center. It's a lifestyle center for sure. But everything is driven by what happens in New York and London. And so thank you very much for taking us through this comparison. And we'll keep our fingers crossed that the genius is Mr. Carney, perhaps, uh, be a leader of good sense.
Excellent, excellent. Well, it's been great, and I hope this information will be interesting uh, for your for your audience, our audience.
Let's do this
Um,
again and
let's do it
follow the
again.
trends. Let's follow the trends.
Yeah,
Yeah. Thank you,
definitely.
James Moss at CurzonCentral.com. Cheers.
Cheers.
Hitting the right button.